Hello and welcome to Verum Fabula Fellowship Podcast. I'm Wes Mullins.
And I'm Randy Hardman, and we will be your hosts today. It is our goal to bring you content that cultivates and enriches your daily interactions and encourages the refinement of character and intellect. The terrain we cover ranges from literature to philosophy to theology. It is our hope that through these lenses we can offer insight to the human experience and the human condition that is empowering and transformative.
Verum Fabula Fellowship is located in the beautiful town of Wilmore, Kentucky, and the podcast takes place at Drinkling's Roastery on Main Street. This is also where the fellowship meets regularly and where members are encouraged to present new thoughts and ideas, engage with interesting and important topics in discussion seminars, and interact with and listen to keynote speakers invited in to challenge us intellectually and spiritually. It is a true intellectual collective. Please rate this podcast on iTunes, and if we've said things that are helpful, be sure to tell your Lewis and Tolkien friends about us. With no more ado, here we go. Further up and further in. All right. Welcome to Verum Fabula Fellowship. I'm Wes Mullins, and the rest of you are amazing people too. We've had some great meetings over the last few weeks. We just finished up the Great Divorce. I think we did justice to that. It was fantastic. And this week, it starts a very small but powerful book called By Niggle by JRR Tolkien. And just some initial reactions from you guys that read it. What did you think? And did you expect this little book to be so powerful, if you thought it was powerful?
I've gotten 25% of the way through because I haven't finished my class reading yet.
I mean, congratulations on being here, really.
Yes, thank you.
That's more of the accomplishments that you're here. I'm impressed.
The first quarter of the book was very telling. In terms of the mindset of the artist, I found myself resonating with him quite a bit in the opening pages, and I was. But then at the same time, I was like, "Not good, buddy." and it was an interesting start to the like pseudo narrative. It was interesting, yeah.
Nina, calling you out.
Well, after having one of my best friends and my best friend, Wes, tell me how he cried 8,000 times in this and how moving it was, I was super depressed because I finished it and I'm like, I don't get it. I got some of it, but I didn't feel the move and I didn't understand everything. I mean, I liked reading it though, like the story. I was intrigued by it, but and then Wes had to explain it to me. When Wes explains it to me, then I find it much more moving. I think I need to read it again to feel it. But so I can't say I had a powerful experience with the story, not yet, anyways. But what was the question?
Just initial thoughts.
I loved it, and the fact that he was an artist, I felt very resonating with him. Like I felt very personal with Niggle. And then not to like jump too far, but then like what happens with his painting and all that, that's very moving and very like that. I don't know how close he was with that and knowing the roots. It's like what we talked about last time of like the passion, what starts the painting, you know, it's like what I saw out of it, not just the physical painting itself, and how those passions kind of dwindled away over time and other things got in the way, but then they were good things. And I don't know, just the balance, how he tried to use it as a good way to balance the scale of the right thing and the wrong thing and your passions versus being selfless and all of that. I loved it. I thought it was great.
I'm farther than I thought. Apparently, I'm 70% of the way through.
It's a very small book.
I was going to say, it's literally...
It takes like an hour to read.
I think
it's 10 pages on PDF.
He's just found the real tree.
Okay.
And I was like, oh.
Yeah, you're pretty far then.
Yeah, you're like at the end.
Yeah, you're right there.
I think there's how many pages?
Yeah.
43.
I'm connecting the pieces, but I'm connecting them in like foreshadowing way because I haven't quite had all of them come together yet. But I'm like, I think I know where he's going with this. But he's just seen the tree.
You're probably right.
You're pretty far then, yeah.
I just recognize C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. They really like the idea of purgatory.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
Yeah.
like it's an idea that I went to Catholic school the last couple of years in high school. It's a lot like it's like I always consider a bunch of this stuff complete heresy. They would always try to you take religion class and stuff. Are you Catholic? Okay, I don't know.
No.
It's got to check.
No.
But the kids in the class knew that like I was opposed to Mariology. I mean, I'm like 16. I'm just born again. Just went to the school, and like during my first year, the Lord just like found them, and it was. But I see that there's like a lot of like he likes this idea of like purgatory.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in that other story, C.S. Lewis story. It's like purgatory everywhere. I was talking with Laura over last night, and I sent you a text. Did you get it?
Yeah.
I didn't know you could get it because you didn't respond.
I didn't respond. I thought I didn't. Did I not respond? Because Nina and I talked about your text.
Yeah.
Oh.
I guess I didn't respond. So that was my
Discussed it
He wrote something. I watched him do it.
I wrote
I
something
literally
I
saw him write it, so maybe he didn't send it, which he does often also.
Sometimes I'll hit the send button and it
His big thumbs don't get the arrow, and he
my
thinks he's
banana
done
age
it.
Doesn't send, and then I'm like,
I've
oh
done
wait,
that.
a week later, so you didn't get
I've done
that.
that. So I thought it was interesting. I thought one of the things I found out was it's always difficult when you see a stereotype of an artist. People love like writing. Like there's another book by a French artist, 19th century French artist called like The Masterpiece, like The Perfect Masterpiece. I can't remember what it's called. The Unseen Painting. And it was like there's these stereotypes about artists. And this was a very well-known French classical book. But that's the one thing about this is a little stereotypical, but just like every other good stereotype, it's about 99% true.
Yeah.
Which is why it's a
Now,
stereotype.
Tolkien was an artist himself, though, so
Well, yeah, and there was.
if you see his artwork, it's kind of insane.
There was a scene, and like,
Yeah.
did you
I
see
wanna
that
see it.
recent? There was this. What was? It wasn't the Queen. It was the one where John Lithgow plays Winston Churchill.
Oh yeah, the Queen.
Dark
That's
Tower.
The Dark. was
No,
the-
no,
that
John
was Gary
Lithgow.
Oldman. That was Gary Oldman, yes.
The Queen.
Oh yes, you're right.
Queen. Wait, is it called The Queen? It's the Netflix show.
There's a Netflix show.
Oh.
They had this section in
The Crown.
The Crown. Thank you.
Is that what it
I thought you were
was?
talking
Yeah.
about something else.
The Crown.
Okay.
But there was a similar kind of play between Grant, what was his name? The guy who did the portrait. He was a famous modernist artist in Britain.
Oh,
Grant Sutherland, I think is his name is. He's famous, and there was this interplay between like Winston Churchill. If you haven't seen it, there's like, and he got upset. He threw away the painting. It was like a commission by Parliament.
Oh, about Churchill,
Yeah.
the painting he hated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Grant Sutherland was like a great painter. He's like a great modernist
Yeah.
painter. But there was even that show. There was tons of stereotypes, like about even like how paint goes on a canvas. That was like it's like nails in a chalkboard to me. There's just certain things that we just whenever somebody does a movie about an artist, the way they paint is not the way artists. It's not the way that I paint. It's like.
What if you found out that everyone else painted that way, and it was just you that painted differently?
It's like they like.
I have no idea.
It's the same thing for athletes, though. I mean, if you watch a movie of a basketball player and you actually play basketball, you're like, really, no one shoots like that. No one's form is really like that if you really play that.
That's how I feel about characters in movies that have asthma.
No one really has
They
asthma
take
that
their
way.
inhaler, I'm like, that's not how you do it. It's the nerdiest thing, but it gets me.
You have asthma, now we know.
But yeah.
So
Anyway.
So what's the point of that?
Is it good?
Well,
No, I'm saying there
trying
is
to-
a point to it.
there
So,
is a point to it. No, I really didn't like it, and I'm sorry, I didn't. It was like a side trail. But I did want to say this about it. That it was like I thought it was the text I sent to them is that in this relationship between Wes and I actually have like a compendium between Wes, Randy, and I, where Randy, as long as I've known him, will accept no literal thing. Period. Okay.
He is outside.
Say, where is
And
Randy?
Wes is like in the middle where he's like literal and metaphorical. And then I am like Captain Literal. Like if it's in scripture, if it's like written, I want it to be absolutely like experiential. And when I was reading this story, like everything he was going through, I was like that day I was going through that. I was like, I just came back from the river painting, I've just dropped my kids off and I needed to go and finish this river painting. I was telling you guys this. And the next door neighbor was like, I really want you to come to our
Man, it sounds just like him.
1 hour slot, and it has to be a completely crystal clear day, like today, for the color to turn pink. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this thing. It was great. There was prayer, there was healing and stuff happening there. And it was like, the day I was reading it, it was absolutely literal. Everything about it was literal. And it's like, for me, it's like, I read stories like this, and it's hard for me to actually like get the metaphors. I'm sorry, Wes, I keep like talking. But the point, okay, somebody else talk about the point. I'm sorry, I could talk about this for a long time.
So
I didn't
That's
get the
great.
point, but
so he's pulling at something here,
Right.
and we do when we use a stereotype, we do that because it's
mostly true.
it's not necessarily mostly true, but it's mostly known. And so if you bring up something that is completely accurate, you may lose a lot of people because they don't know that or don't have that idea of it. So you're playing with an idea, not playing with a literal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just have some questions here as we go through the book that I wanted to get to that I think could help us unpack this, because even though it's a very small book, there's a ton of stuff going on here. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and there are a bunch of artists in the room, so let's see, do you have the book right there? Let's see. Just the way he opens, which I think Niggle was a painter, not a very successful one, partly because he had many other things to do. Most of these he thought were a nuisance, but he did them fairly well when he could not get out of them, which in his opinion was far too often. The laws in this country were rather strict. There were other hindrances too. For one thing, he was sometimes just idle and did nothing at all. For another, he was kind-hearted in a way. You know, the sort of kind-heart that made him uncomfortable more often than it made him do anything. And even when he did anything, it did not prevent him from grumbling, losing his temper, swearing mostly to himself. All the same, it did land him in a good many odd jobs for his neighbor, Mr. Parrish. Okay, so he was a painter, but not a very successful one. So one of the things that jumped out to me was, what does it mean to be a successful artist?
We just had this conversation with my daughter last night. Keep going.
There is no such thing.
Wait, there's no such
Basically.
thing as success, or there's no such definition?
There's no
Successful
such thing as a
artist.
Successful artist.
Those two words don't go together.
Yeah. No, it's that's a hard question.
You're successful when you die.
The whole argument between are you successful when you're popular, or are you successful when your work is appreciated, and how much appreciation does it warrant to have success, or how much appreciation do you need to therefore have success on that level? If it's just that your work is being appreciated, there's always.
And then if you're successful to the masses, are you really successful? Because as an artist, you don't want to be really to the masses, because then it's not, the emotional connectedness you have it's more vague and ambiguous, and you don't want that. It's a big mess. You can say if that's true or not.
Well, just thinking of all the professors say. No, it's a good. I taught my daughter said last night, I think I want to be an artist and the kind of scientist that protects penguins. She wants to protect the endangered penguins. She was
Ooh, I'm with
4
her.
years old. She's loved penguins. She was barely walking. But she asked how do you be an artist? Well, how do you know that you're good at it? Well, I don't know. So what you can do is be a good artist, but you may not necessarily be a or you may.
Well, it says here on page 10, he had a number of pictures on hand. Most of them were too large and ambitious for his skill. That's pretty telling, isn't it? So he's not successful maybe because he's not very good at whatever type of art he's attempting.
Yeah, that was an interesting point, and that's something that I've actually struggled with over the years, because there's a difference between being a good filmmaker of any kind and being a good filmmaker of a certain kind.
Mm-hmm.
I would never in a million years trust Michael Moore to direct Lord of the Rings. But he's got a good style of documentary, and I also wouldn't trust Wes Anderson to direct Lord of the Rings. It's just not his thing. And people who find their thing often find success. And actually, it seems like Niggle's thing was leaves. And he was good at leaves, but he didn't want to stick to leaves. He wanted to do larger things. And so that kind of, it's often a struggle, especially for people when they're starting out finding their thing. Like, I still feel like I haven't found my thing.
Right.
Like, I have things that I've found lately that I'm better at than other things, but honing in on exactly the style is taking a long time.
I think that as an artist is a big struggle from people that I know, not just me too, but other people that I know, is sometimes the thing you're the best at isn't the thing you enjoy doing the most. The type of art or the stylistic of art, like sometimes I remember when I was taking a drawing class, like, I hate drawing. I hate it. And I was so much better at it than I was sculpting when I first started. Like, it took so much more willpower and determination for me to, like, persevere through a 3-dimensional sculpture than it did through painting on, like, or drawing 2D. Like, I was way better at it just from the start. And I think maybe as a kid I developed that, I don't know. But either way, it was frustrating because I would say, like, I'm good at this, but I don't like it and I don't want to do this. And so I think that's probably something. And he talks about in there, he was good at drawing leaves or painting leaves, but he wasn't as good as painting the whole tree. I think didn't it say that he focused on leaf? So.
Yeah, so one of the underlying, and we'll dive into this more, just be thinking about this. One of the main questions that Tolkien is pulling on here is there a purpose to art? Mm-hmm. Does it have value on earth and heaven? Mm-hmm. Francis Schaeffer talks about this a little. We'll get into this a little more, but so he's pulling up. What is the purpose of painting? What is the purpose of art? And that purpose will dictate if you're successful or not, if you're hitting the mark, right? I mean, if the purpose of art is to make money, then if you don't make money, you're not successful. But if that's not the purpose of it, then there's a way to be successful and not hit certain other areas. So there was one picture in particular which bothered him. It had begun with a leaf caught in the wind, and it became a tree, and the tree grew, sending out innumerable branches, thrusting out the most fantastic roots. Strange birds came and settled on the twigs that he had attended to. Then all around the capital T tree, and behind it, through the gaps in the leaves and boughs, a country began to open out, and there were glimpses of a forest marching over the land, and a mountain tipped with snow. Niggle lost interest in all other pictures. And this is the first. If there's ever a cannon fired, that was a huge cannon fired right there, going forward. So, David, I think you mentioned he was with leaves. Well, why was he obsessed with leaves? Because it began with a leaf, just one single leaf blowing in the wind, and he couldn't get it out of his head. Most of us that have some kind of artistic aspirations, there's something that we call it passion that Tolkien says it bothered him. Mm-hmm. He couldn't get it out of his mind. It almost in a sense haunted him, that this thing that he saw. And so one of the questions is, what do we do with that obsession? Right? What is it? We could ask her, what do we do with that obsession? And is it healthy? Is it healthy to have that obsession?
I'm just thinking about this because I've come about it in a very different way. Obviously, I started off doing a lot of tree paintings. Like you have one of my earlier paintings, but I
one of your earliest, yeah.
Like interior forest, light hitting trees. That's what I started off doing. A lot of this kind of stuff at first. But I think I didn't come from a family of artists. I never allowed I think I had probably 3 to 5 solid regional solo shows in galleries regionally before I thought, I think I'm an artist now. Like, I read my MFA, I'd been teaching 5 to 10 years. I still didn't feel like I could say I was an artist.
Yes.
And I think part of that was that I just didn't come from a family that my dad valued beauty. He loved photography, but I didn't come from a family where it wasn't faith expression that it wasn't enough. If that makes sense. Now, other people around me did, but that's like an opposite way where like getting trapped in like doing this thing, the obsession. I've actually had to come about where my wife is like, you need to be okay with just spending tons of time in the studio. Because I'd always go to the studio, even when I was in graduate school, and I'd want to come home and be with my family. I want to like leave the studio early and spend time with Laura, or leave the studio early to go spend time with my kids and or work on my garden, do something else. Like it bothered me to be in the studio. So it took me a while to actually be like, it was actually partially the Lord and my wife convincing me that when you're in the studio, it's an act of like service and worship. It took a while for me to really receive that, which is difficult to receive. I don't know why that is. It's just
I have the same thing.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, no, I have the same thing. I don't like I get caught up in making things and writing things. And, you know, the whole time I'm thinking, I just want to be back with Janella. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to leave her alone while I'm just out here doing all this stuff. And I all the time, and it's difficult to not to kind of not feel like the obsession is almost negative or drawing me away from better things, you know. And it's not any one thing in particular that's drawing me away from. It's almost like I guess almost like the good things that God puts forth, you know, that I don't want to neglect. And it's a lot of things too. It's not just, you know, it's like it could be any number of things. Just even taking a walk, you know, like that kind of stuff. I feel like gets neglected sometimes when I'm in that obsession.
A walk in the woods.
Mode. Yeah, exactly. And it's difficult. It's difficult to find that balance for me in terms of feeling okay with it.
I feel like it's so tough because most artists I know are extremists. I'm an extremist. It's like all in or all out. Like, so anytime I'm in the studio, it's like, I remember my sophomore year of college, I basically lived in a studio. I slept there more than I slept in my apartment. Like, and you don't even notice. You get so wrapped up in this. I don't know. It's like it's an obsession. It really is. But I don't know if you realize that. And there's something like you dignify it with, and you justify the things that you're doing because you're like, well, for me, I was like, well, God gives me these passions, so that's why I want to pursue it. But then at the same time, there's self-discipline and there's other things that I should be giving my time to as well. So it's almost like this combat, and that makes you go crazy because you're like, well, why do I obsess over this so much? And it's different than hobbies. I feel like, you know, hobbies and things that you enjoy are so much different. Like, there's so many things I enjoy. Yes, and I enjoy other things, but I don't have this like weird burning passion to be there and working on it. It's almost like you look at yourself and you're like, I'm crazy. Like, I'm really been in the studio for 24 hours straight and I've loved every second, but I think I need to go do something else. But at the same time, it's like it fills you up, you know, and you're like, should I feel convicted for being filled up by something of a passion that God gave me that's so innocent, but also it's not, you know? I don't know, it's tough. That's how I feel. But I'm also 23 years old, so.
I think it's such a good question. It's like, I think there's like a continuum, like what you were saying, like I know a lot of folks who are like you, where there's like, I remember when I was in grad school at UK, this is something that I totally resented, and I use this as a teaching of how not to be. The professors, including like Gary Bitts, they would say this thing. They would say, if your family life isn't suffering, then you're not working hard enough.
Oh my gosh. That sounds like something he would say.
Well, that's what they would all say. Most of them were divorced. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want your life.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, had
Yeah.
horrible family lives. Like, no one was married.
True.
Everyone was like on their second marriage. But that was kind of like this ethic that it was like, we must devote ourselves to the cult of art.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who's, you know, a kingdom believer, I was like highly opposed to that. And actually, there was I don't think you ever knew, but there was my major professor there, his name is Jim Coos.
Mm-hmm.
And he died just a few years ago, but he'd gone through it negatively. Like, he'd been divorced twice, and he'd come back to the Lord. He was like, I'm only believing professors. And so I really gravitated, and he was an American, world famous, like specifically America landscape painter, but he first came to me, his area was like artistic research and like artists' lives and studios. And he said to me, he sat me down, he was a great mentor, he said, Chris, when you look at the history of artists so like I made it, when he said that to me, I made it my point. I was gonna like break this goal, that I was gonna show an example of an artist who had a great family life. That was like my goal was like to have a great family life, but it was like what you're talking. You know what I'm talking about when I say this. It's like.
Yeah. I think that's why I chose to do a degree that wasn't art for that reason, because I knew it wasn't going to be healthy to do that. And people always ask me, why did you choose to do a career path right now that's other than art? And I'm like, because I don't need to be there all the time. Like I said, my sophomore year, I was so consumed by it in what I thought was a good way. But when you say it like that, you look back, and I look back, and I'm like, man, I missed out. Even if that was just 1 year of college, which is no big deal. But I was doing something great. I'm sure I could be doing way worse things than being in the studio. But still, it's still something I look back on now, and that's why I chose a different path.
Now I feel bad for saying.
No, it's good. That's so good. It's true. And everyone I know, every MFA that was above me was the same. None of them were. Yes.
Because
it's very true.
In my studio, my first
very
year,
true.
second year at Asbury, I was in my studio. Clarify this, and this kind of gets into this legal thing here. I was in my studio, and the art department has traditionally been a pretty dark place. It's just like, I can explain it later. A lot of professors got fired and never for different things that they shouldn't have been doing. But one day I was just worshiping. I said, okay, I'm going to start a new show. I'm going to worship. And then the Holy Spirit spoke to me and basically laid a covenant before me. Not in the most sense of biblical covenant, but it went like this. I heard the Holy Spirit say, if I want you to come into the studio, I've called you to paint, and I want you to come and be faithful to come here and paint. And if you will just seek me and seek my input and co-labor with me when you paint, you do this work, he said, I will open every door for every gallery. I will sell every painting for you. I will be your marketer and publicist. If you will just come and be faithful to come in and worship me and paint. I just heard him say that. I was like, okay. And that's what started, galleries started calling me after that. But that was the first kind of initiative of okay, this is actually an act of worship. So I want to balance that by saying that when I'm in the studio, I'm actually obeying God.
That's good.
The other side.
That's true, yeah.
That comes
Just
to
a balance,
That comes
like
to
you
this
said.
notion of what is the purpose of art.
Yeah.
So if your purpose is to become famous or to feed an obsession only for notoriety and fame, then it is going to get dark. It is going to get darker because you're going more into shadow. You're going more away from God. You're going more away from light to create art, in which it becomes obsessive and consumes you. And this is a good part of the book here I want to bring in. He could not get rid of his kind heart. I wish I was more strong-minded, he sometimes said to himself, meaning that he wished other people's troubles didn't make him feel uncomfortable. But for a long time, he was not seriously perturbed. At any rate, I shall get this one picture done, my real picture, before I have to go on that wretched journey, he used to say. Yet he was beginning to see that he could not put off his start indefinitely. The picture would have to stop growing and just get finished. One day, Niggle stood a little way off from his picture and considered it with unusual attention and detachment. He could not make up his mind what he thought about it, and wished some friend who would tell him what to think. Actually, it seemed to him wholly unsatisfactory and yet very lovely. The only real beautiful picture in the world. What would he have liked at that moment would have been to have seen himself walk in, slap him on the back, and say with obvious sincerity, absolutely magnificent. I see exactly what you're getting at. Do get on with it. Don't bother about anything. We'll arrange for a public pension so that you need not. So, this is the first time we're actually introduced to the notion of death. Hollywood Ray talks about that. The thing that the journey that Niggle has to go on, that he has to pack for, is actually death. Mm-hmm. So we're still pulling at this thread. What is the purpose of art? Why is it here? And we see Niggle going and saying, man, what I really want to do is I want somebody to come by and give me a congratulatory pat on the back and say, this thing's amazing. Spend all of your time doing this. But we've talked about that you can't just do that. Nathaniel Hawthorne, you guys know what he wrote some pretty good books. The Scarlet Letter. Okay, that's his masterpiece. he wrote that while working for the state. He was working in a boring job pushing papers, and he let his mind wander and actually got the idea and started writing that. When he got famous enough after that to write other things, nothing ever matched up to that. I attribute that to the fact that he was doing menial tasks and allowed his mind to do other things and have greater imagination. For some people, if there's not tension of life and you're not pushing the boundaries to get into that art, so I'm going to make this count today because I have a couple hours to sketch the light. I have to get this. Mm-hmm. And your mind is working, how do I do this? If you have an infinite amount of time to do something, you're not going to create anything masterful or wonderful because that tension's not there. And so this is what I see Niggle wanting that, but unable to get it. And so we see in other places that his potato crop suffers. Like he doesn't, his place is shabby looking. And there are a bunch of laws and like you can't have shabby looking houses and things like this. And so he's got to wrestle with this. And for myself, what you guys were talking about as the artist is when I get into a frame of mind and I'm writing and I'm in this imaginative place, I used to get so mad at the kids because they would burst in and they have a million questions. I have like this amazing thought. Like this is to me, it's the most amazing thought ever. And this thing's being opened up to me, and it's like a ticker tape information is flowing into my brain. I'm trying to write it down as fast as possible because if somebody comes and touches me, if they say something to me, it's gone forever. Like it goes into the ether. And so the kids would go, "Daddy," and I hold a finger up and I go, and I told them, I explained to them one time, I was like, it's like Daddy's floated up into space. And I've grabbed a star and I've opened it up and I'm getting all these secrets and all this information is being downloaded. And so what they say is I'm writing like that. They go, "Daddy, are you holding a star?" Yes. Like, okay. And they leave me alone. So,
that's cute.
But you can't live holding a star all the time because there's other things in life. And so what we're really talking about here is we're talking about what is the purpose of art, but there's also a main theme here is choice and attitude, right? You can be obsessed and make good choices and have good attitudes about things. And we'll get into that in just a little bit more, but be thinking about this, it's attitude and choice, not necessarily the obsession that's wrong.
Yes, it's your perspective.
It's your perspective and how you're engaging with that. If you have the right purpose, you should make the correct choices and have the correct attitudes there. But if the purpose for why you're doing art is misconstrued, then your art's going to be misconstrued and your choices are going to be out of line and out of whack. So
go ahead.
Yes.
I want to hit on something with that because I heard somebody talking about. I was listening to a teaching about Elijah and Elisha and the transition between the two of them. Which this is something that I have to remember. I think that artists and just creative people need to remember. Musicians too. Is that you have Elijah doing his stuff, and Elisha's like, Elijah is letting Elisha know, I'm leaving soon. Mm-hmm. He's leaving soon. And Elisha says, No, I want your anointing. What do you want me to do for you? I want your double portion anointing. He says, okay, well, if you want this, you have to follow me here. And he keeps following him, and he says, you can stay here. And Elisha's like, no, I want to follow you. And then he finally says, if you see me go up in chariots of fire, if you take the mantle or whatever, he says, you will have this. And the interesting part about it, I heard this person teaching on this, is that to Elijah, the anointing was common. Because he'd had this, maybe his whole life. He was used to, seeing miracles. He was used to hearing God audibly and seeing, the sky open up and fire come down. And the point of that is that for artists and for creative types in general, the holy things can become common. And this has happened to me before. I'm I can just quit painting. When there's other people I recognize in the world, when they see a painting, their heart melts because that's not who they don't have that gift set, but yet they have that desire, but they don't have the words for that. And so the artist comes in there and actually gives them words like a writer to the deep things inside of their heart. But to the artist,
interesting point too, because you see a lot of Asian artists start to lose their touch. I think because it becomes common to them, and also maybe like we were talking about, the limitations aren't put on them anymore. Like for example, we talk often in film about how George Lucas's early work is so far superior to his later work by leaps and bounds. And mainly, that's often attributed to the fact that he was limited by the studios to what he could do, and he was forced to be creative in ways that he never would have otherwise. Like, he made Star Wars, the first one, on like a nothing budget for what he was doing. It was just incredible, and the limitations imposed upon him forced him to do all these things that were revolutionary at the time, that changed the way science fiction was made. And so, I guess all that to say, oftentimes we see those limitations as a burden when in fact they can be a great gift to our work. And that's that even for almost I would say like 95% of the projects I've ever done, I've had to do alongside something else to stay alive.
Right.
So, and it's usually the ones that are the best are the ones that I was forced to kind of like find a way to show the story despite the limitations.
What?
Think about it. Go ahead.
Well, Wes and I were talking about that today, just about, you have your entrepreneurs, like your millionaires, multi-millionaires, and most of them have come from circumstances most of us can't understand, like horrible circumstances, and they've come into, but they push through, but because of their struggle, they were able to go after something they may not have gone after had they been given everything growing up. But I feel like that's most of life. Like when we suffer or go through difficult things or have challenges or limitations, if we want something bad enough, we fight through those things, and something even more beautiful comes out of it because of that struggle. And I don't know, and that's why we're all inspired by those stories, because they're like, well, if they can do it, certainly I can do it. But sometimes it's like the struggle even more so brings, I don't know, the beautiful work of art, the amazing multi-million-dollar company or whatever it is.
So just think about how incredible Shakespeare is, especially with his sonnets and things. Because Shakespearean sonnet has an iambic pentameter, has a certain meter and a certain rhyme and certain couplets and has certain syllables. He limited himself. It's really hard to be able to limit yourself down to a formula and yet remain honest and speak truth and not just be formulaic. Yet these masters, like Edmund Spencer, the Fairy Queen, he wrote this massive epic saga poem that metered and rhymed the whole time. How incredible a piece of art is that? It's much more powerful and creative than writing free verse. Where I have no limitations. You can write anything you want. It's almost there's not enough boundaries. Because it could be go anywhere. But like this is going to be this, and you're like, wow, this guy, he hits it on the meter, on the rhyme, and you're like, that's incredible. I want to talk about Parrish for a second. What was your feelings on Parrish?
I didn't like him.
I felt like he was the metaphor of the world around us. I felt like he was the world. It's like the pulling the world from, especially a creative person on the interior life, pulling resources. And at some points, I felt like he was like a healthy balance, even though he was selfish. He seemed selfish, because it's very clear that he never came to ask Niggle for any help. I actually wrote down one quote that stuck out to me about him, which I thought was very interesting telling. Let's read this. Can I read this little like paragraph?
Yeah. Nice.
It says, when Parrish looked at Niggle's garden, which was often, he saw mostly weeds. And when he looked at Niggle's pictures, which was seldom, he saw only green and gray patches and black lines, which seemed to him nonsensical. He did not mind mentioning the weeds, and they were fleeting. But he refrained from giving any opinion on the pictures. He thought this was very kind, and did not realize that even though it was kind, it was not kind enough. Help with the weeds, and perhaps praise for the pictures would have been better. And I thought, like,
I underlined that part too. That same quote.
that hits you too.
Same quote.
It's kind of like it shows like Parrish was unable to like actually like respond and like actually what Niggle actually needed. Niggle was able to give Parrish what he needed. He was unable to. He just didn't care. I think he just didn't care enough about him to like empathize. Said, what does this person really need? Like, rather than complaining about the weeds, why didn't Parrish just like say, hey, let me help you with your garden?
What do you think? What do you think would be a cause for Parrish's response to Niggle? I mean, so when he walks in, I imagine Niggle's painting like, see this entire wall up there, and he's got this ladder up, and he's just putting canvases up, and he's continuing to, it's just grown until he built this whole shed he built this big thing to have this painting in. And he's watching this guy, well-abled and well-bodied, going up and down a ladder, spending his time painting. His garden's going to waste. Well, Parrish is lame. Do you think there's some envy there?
Yeah.
And there's you're misusing your talents. You're misrepresenting the gifts God gave you. You're using them incorrectly. So this goes back to, I keep looking at what's the purpose of art.
There's also the sense of entitlement, like, well, you should be helping me.
Because I'm lame.
But also because this scenario, what you're saying right there, this is another thing that my mentor in grad school would really talk about. He said he lived on Main Street in Nashville, and he said he had his insurance agent would come by every so often and come to him and say, and his name is Foos, and say, Foos, when are you going to give me one of your paintings? Like, he's like nationally known artist. And he would respond and say, when are you going to give me free life insurance?
Yes.
That would end the conversation, but there's that, especially in America, in the West, there's a sense of like, because we're a very pragmatic, symbolic culture, rather than observational culture, there's an implicit disrespect for anything that's not pragmatically earning.
Let's go on that. And you brought up something that's very great. So let's pull apart the observation. Okay. What does Parrish see? What does he see?
He sees lines in gray and green
Patches.
blobs.
Yeah.
Right, and he sees blobs. What does he? So he has a hierarchy of values,
Yes.
right? And so he goes outside, and what he expects that he should see is he should see a green garden.
Yes.
He should see flourishing grass in a well-maintained place, but he doesn't. And then when he comes in and he looks at the canvas, he can't even see the value of what's on the canvas, and so he just sees pragmatically what you said. He just sees blobs,
Right.
and then he sees disrepair. So he comes in, he sees Niggle does nothing of value. Everything's nonsense. His entire life is nonsense.
I've had people, including the provost, come and say the exact same thing. They have paintings. It's like, it was interesting. I picked your paintings. All I saw was blobs and stuff. And I stood back and I could see a picture, which is intentional. Like, that is a common thing that I hear. And depending on somebody's life circumstance, and depending on like their job in life, is how they a lot of times respond to my work. A friend of mine who's a well-known orthodontist in Lexington, he has multiple, you heard him on the radio, he's a friend of mine. I remember when I was doing my show, and I gave him a show card, my MFA show, and like, he looked at the paintings like, oh, I see it down there, like, in the sky, like, it's like the Holy Spirit, like, even though that'd be great. Like, that's his response, and like, I was like, oh, it just taught me something that, like, you bring your work to people, and some people, like, if they don't have a perception for appreciation, they'll trample over it like pearls and pigs in scripture.
one of my beginning art classes, I don't know, it was like my freshman year, and I guess they're trying to like weed out people who are like actually serious about it, or if they're not. Yeah, I guess so. But I remember they had this big painting. It was up on like the big screen, and our professor, might have been art history class, and she said like, "What do you guys see?" Like everyone started talking about like what you see. And I think she like wrote down some people's answers, and it was very simplistic painting. It reminded you said a dove, so it reminded me that it was a bird on a branch. But of course, like an artist would see so much deeper into it, like the fact that the whole tree trunk was out and it was a branch, but you could only see the branch and the bird. So it's almost like they were depicting like something that was, you couldn't see the end result of like where it came from or where it was coming from, and you just saw a bird on this thing. Anyways, I could tell you my whole response to it, but it was really awesome, and I was amazed at how beautiful, and the painting was huge, and there was so much room. But everything was intentional, every little cloud, everything. But to other people, I guess, obviously it looked as just nothing. It was just a bird on a branch, and that was it. But if you looked in detail of like every stroke, and everything was so intentional, the artist could have painted the whole tree trunk, everything, but they didn't. And there's a reason why they didn't. And of course, I don't remember the title of the piece, but it explained a lot of like why he chose to do, like aesthetically, why he did what he did. And she asked that same question, and I remember just sitting there, and we sat there for like an excessive amount of time before anyone could speak, and I'm sure it was obviously intentional. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm writing, and I'm so ready to talk about this painting. And so she asked that, and she said, "Okay, everyone, say what you think." And then of course, like half the class was like, "It's just a bird on a branch." Like, I don't know. I like how it's a red bird. That's a pretty bird. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And some people, and it's not a bad thing, but some people, I'm sure that's why she did that, was just to see, like who sees this versus who sees that, and like who has an eye for, it's way more than just,
And that's what you meant. That's my mother. My mother will look at a painting, like, is there a horse in there or something? Is that a fish?
That's not parents. For sure. Yes. It's funny.
So, can we trust Parrish when he says, right after this is exactly after what you just read there, "I oughtn't to interrupt you, I know," Harry said without glancing up at the picture. "You are very busy, I'm sure." Niggle had meant to say something like that himself, but he had missed his chance, and all he said was yes. "But I have no one else to turn to," said Parrish. "Quite so," said Niggle with a sigh, and one of those sighs that are a private comment, but which are not made quite inaudible. "What can I do for you?" And so he goes on, "Come visit my wife." Now, we know a few pages before that when Parrish became ill, he had streams of visitors coming to see him. But here he says, "I've no one to turn to." And he says, "I oughtn't interrupt you." Do you think he's honestly considering I shouldn't interrupt you? He's already looked around. You read it before. He's looked around and said, "This place is..." He's not doing anything. He's not busy. He's just painting blobs.
It's also just a cultural courtesy in some ways. Like that, it's a very English phrase to say, "Oh, I know I oughtn't do this," but it's just kind of like almost a passing sort of, "Oh, I'm about to do something uncomfortable, but I recognize that probably it could have been better, but I got to do it anyway, so here we go." So I don't know. It seems like almost like a throwaway phrase to me, and having been on the receiving end, having been in Niggle's place before in those situations, I'm just kind of like, well, here it comes, or it's like kind of when people, like yourself said, devaluing your work. People will come and ask me, "Hey, can you do this, video project for me or something?" I'm like, do you realize how many hours it's going to take?
Exactly. This happens, especially for the seminary. People with lots of big ideas, like work at staff at the seminary, say, "Hey, could you do a painting for me on this wall? It's like, I'll shoot a student who wants to do it, but like they don't understand that what they're asking. They're like, I had the last provost. Did you know Kulak?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. When he first came to, he's like, "Hey, could you do like a big painting on the wall in the student center, and I'll like do a tax write-off for you?" It's like, first of all, that's illegal. The only people who get tax write-offs are people who actually purchase the painting. That's the law. And secondly, I'm like, why would I do something that would require hundreds of hours of work that there are people who are waiting for me to make paintings that actually put shoes on my children's feet. So I said to him, was like, pay for their food. It's like, why would I do that? Would you do that?
Would you do that?
What did he say?
He came back later and says he said this, like, I've come to understand that artists like to be paid for their work. That's what he said. He said, like, artists
Really?
like to be paid.
Who would have
It's
thought?
like, but this is a common problem. I mean, it's like, it's a common struggle that artists have where you're doing something aesthetic that's not immediate, that's of value, but not like instantaneously. It doesn't.
It's like being asked to bring your camera to everything when you're a photographer.
That's different because I was asking that. No, it's not. I'm just joking with you.
I hear yeah.
It's, I don't know.
You
if
are.
This happens with, like, I'll just give you a circumstance, interior detail. My brother, my family is a very businessy family all the way through, all the way into Jamaica. I have a cousin who's like my mom's cousin is like the minister of
Magic.
tourism for the entire country of Jamaica. The minister, like my mom's other cousin runs like the biggest distillery in the islands.
It's my birthday, so I'm gonna watch the Packers.
My brother, don't leave, Randy.
I'm sorry.
He wants to.
Happy
My
birthday!
birthday. And
Oh, happy birthday!
the Packers are playing. So,
Get out of here.
May
I'm
the odds be
not
ever in
red
their
leaf
favor.
by Niggle, so
Birthday.
Just enjoy it.
And so my parents own a business. My brother went into business, and he's like a director of a big multi-billion-dollar corporation underneath the CFO. And my mom will make little comments like this that, like, I'm about to reveal something here. So my mom will say, your brother's really struggling with work. He's working late nights, and he's like a CPA kind of person controlling billion-dollar budgets. And I was like, he chose that field. Like, he could have chosen something else. He knew what was in that field. And her response was like, well, he works, don't you? I'm like, what does that mean? I work. And it's a common comment, like, let's excuse him, like, not being with his family and coming at 9 o'clock every night. He has 5 kids.
Because he's adding real value to
Because
society.
he's adding real value because he really works.
Which is what Parrish's whole
Exactly.
Yeah.
perception and
Right.
observation
Mom
was.
is Parrish.
Niggle. So again, what's the purpose of art? Is Niggle adding value? That's what he's pulling.
I was going to say, I don't think either one of them really respects what the other has. I felt they are both, like I said to you the other day, they're both righteous in their own eyes.
I
Like
was gonna
Parrish
say,
thought he had, Niggle thought that Parrish complained a little too much, and he didn't do it. And later on in the book, we see that they both underestimated the value of what they both did. And I think Niggle also thought that maybe Parrish was overstating his needs, and then later on we find out that he actually did have some problems that were serious, right? I think it's not, Parrish isn't the only jerk in the scenario. You have Niggle who doesn't really value Parrish, his role at all. Now, it seems Parrish takes advantage a little more and doesn't do as much as Niggle does. They're both kind of like complaining about having to do favors, but Niggle actually does the favors. Parrish doesn't.
So we're contrasting a hierarchy of values is what we're doing.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say all that too, because like the values too are actually like Niggle doesn't understand the value of his own work.
True.
And I found that very disheartening when I was looking at, because never once do you hear what the purpose of the painting was for, other than for his own edification. And that's not
He didn't even know why he was doing it, right?
He
Had to do it.
He just had to do it. Yeah, he had to do it. And the only time we get a hint as to why he's doing it is kind of that moment where his other self comes in and just says, "Oh yes, I see exactly what you're going for." Blah 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 blah. And really, you can see that his driving factor is not so much getting his art. It's not so much showing the world for what it is or illuminating some new truth. It's just for him.
He doesn't know what it is, right? He has no idea what it is right now.
Yeah.
But he just knows that he has this yearning, this unction to do it. So if you don't know why you're doing something, but you feel this passion to do it, is it beneficial to do it?
I'd say yes. I think that this is what as he was talking right here, I was just like, it was hitting me that this is like what Tolkien seems like he's talking about here is actually an analogy to the Garden of Eden. Is what he's actually doing. Is that in the garden, Adam and Eve are supposed to enjoy things flourished and without pragmatic, sweaty labor. Things bore fruit with pretty much ease, and it was like the Garden of Eden was like an open painting where things could just happen. And it was created. I mean, there's always this principle. First time you see something in Scripture, where first time you see God, you see him as literally as an artist creating. And the last time you see God in Scripture is artist creating, which is really important in the Hebrew mindset. And they're like just enjoying, and it's like this. It's like they're flourishing. The garden is expanding, like just like how his painting is expanding. It's like full of possibility. He's naming animals, which is a creative act. God is co-creating, is allowing Adam to co-create artistically with him. He creates the animal, but the naming actually makes it something. Naming is a big deal in the Hebrew world. And then after sin happens, then they toil, and like the toil is like working at the weeds outside. Parish is like working at the weeds, trying to like make the ground like bear fruit. And I look at this, I'm thinking that there's this. It's like the Garden of Eden before and after, like a longing to return to a place where we're like partnering with nature, partnering with creation to make it like artistic and it's flourishing, and then just using it in a pragmatic way to meet our needs, which is what happened after the fall. Does it make sense? It's just a theory that thrown out there, but
Interesting one.
So, yeah, it also says, my wife has been ill for some days, and I am getting worried, said Parrish, and the wind has blown off half the tiles off my roof, and water is pouring into the bedroom. I think I ought to get the doctor. And the builders, too, only they take so long to come. I was wondering if you had any wood and canvas you could spare just to patch me up and see me through for a day or two. Now he did look at the picture. It's interesting. It's interesting that only at that point, because again, his hierarchy of values is pragmatism.
yeah.
And so he looks at it and he's like, this could help me. I'm not seeing the picture for what it is, but I'm seeing it for what it can be for me. What you talk about, people looking at it and go, is that the Holy Spirit in there? What's it, the dove? Is it a horse?
Yeah,
They're seeing what they want to see in it instead of seeing what you're trying to get across to them. Dear, said Niggle, you are unlucky. I hope it is more than a cold. It's no more than a cold that your wife has got. I'll come around presently and help you move the patient downstairs. Thank you very much, said Parrish rather coolly, but it's not a cold, it's a fever. Okay, so he overstates even what's going on, again, in pragmatism. And we're not going to get through much more of this tonight because I like setting up the, we get through all the heavy lifting here, and then the rest of it, I think, is going to be illuminating, because we have some questions here. What is the purpose of art? What should our attitude be towards our passions and obsessions and towards art? Is art beneficial here on Earth, or is it only beneficial later on? What benefits does it have? And what is the relationship between Niggle and Parrish? Because they both seem to be missing each other. They're both missing the mark on what the relationship is supposed to be and what it actually is. So I think that we've got a good start on how to finish up the rest of the book. So if anybody else has any parting thoughts, we can hit those.
I have one.
Yes.
You go first.
No, you go first.
Are you sure?
Mine is way out there. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just thinking when you're talking about this, because I'm thinking like from an art, like I have a very conventional job that's very, like I deal with numbers and math all day and data. And then I also have this like yearning for art that I've always had, and that's like my dream job is to do that for, whenever I get into that state where I can do that, that's what I want to do. And so I was thinking here is it's almost, I feel like our society tries to decide what does true joy come from? Does it come from accomplishing tasks? Is it almost like, it's like tangibility, like we struggle with that, and things that we can't tangibly hold, some people can and some people can't. Like, you know, you have so it reminds me of Ravi's, like, helping the thinker believe and helping the believer think. Like, you know, going back to that whole thing of the two different types of people there are. So you have Parrish, who finds joy in accomplishing tasks, like, you know, having things that can hold weight, that actually have a purpose. And then you have Niggle, who I think struggles because as a society we all do. Like, there are things that give us this internal joy, but we don't know why, and we can't explain it. And we can't tell people, you know, creating film or creating art or these weird things that are not acceptable now. And I think they used to be. I mean, art history classes, everything was made around that, revolved around art and people creating it and trading it. And it was way up, you know, socioeconomically, it was the best thing that you could do. It was the best career, the most, you know, acclimated career you could have. And then now it's kind of different. So I think it's trying to decide where does your value come from? Do you feel accomplished, and do you find joy in doing these things versus doing something like Niggle does? And I think that's where they're missing each other. And it's almost like, I think artists a lot of the time have this condescending attitude towards other people of saying, like, they just don't get it. Like, you know, they just don't get it. And it's not good either way. It's not good either way. Yeah, and it's like, goes back to what you were saying, Nina, about like Parrish isn't the only bad one or the antagonist of the story, because Niggle also has that attitude of he just doesn't get it. I can't explain it. It's just I'm so deep and I'm so in tune with myself that I can't explain why I'm doing this. Does that make sense?
Yes. And there's an essay by C.S. Lewis called Learning During Wartime that is fantastic.
It's in the Weight of Glory.
It's in the Weight of Glory book. And he talks about people saying, well, there's war, so there's no need to have higher education. There's no need to learn the classics. There's no need to paint. There's no need to do art. There's no need for these things because we're in the middle of war. And by doing that, that is a luxury. Yeah. If you're studying Aristotle and you're studying King Arthur, there's no real benefit to that. That's a luxury. That's an entitlement. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be on the front lines. But he makes this great point that you need to be learning during wartime because war won't last forever. And then you can't catch up to the learning. You need to be learning during it because when the war's over and there is peace, you'll need to have people who are ready to step in, who are leaders, who are educated, who have this great wealth of knowledge from the classics and from art and actually are cultured and have this metaphysical idea and this pragmatism that can put imagination and reason together. There you go. I always bring it back to imagination and reason. And actually are well-rounded people and not just pragmatists, or they're not just flighty people, but they have this grounding because they took time to learn when it wasn't convenient. He said there's never going to be a convenient time to learn because something will always be taking the place. If it's not this war, it's another war. If it's not this, it's something else. And so you need to take, while you have the chance, you need to be engaged in that higher learning.
I think it also ties in, well, I was going to mention Weight of Glory actually, but the other part where he's talking about, because we get so practical, and well, we should, instead of painting, we should get a job in business and numbers, right? Because that's what society will be most happy with, and everyone else will support that. Because what are we adding to society with a painting? But I think that ties into what Lewis talks about. I think we talked about this before. The idea that we ask too little of God, and the things that stir up our hearts, it's painting, and to some people it doesn't make sense, or whatever it is, or your passion is. And Lewis says at some point we got it in our heads that we shouldn't ask too much of God, and he's like, it's upside down. It's not that we ask too much of him; it's that we ask too little. And I think it ties into that whole like idea that there's something inside of us, like Niggle's desire to paint. There's a reason it's there, and the only person that's placed it there is God. And there's a reason he put it in each one of us, because Niggle's creating something for everyone else to enjoy, just doesn't know it. And so those things that are inside of us that we're driven by, there's a reason we're driven to them, and we shouldn't neglect those because culture says something different.
And I think also too we should always remember that it isn't for just us that we're doing those, that we're being driven to do those things. Like that obsession can become an odd driver, and if we kind of take the other out of it and we just leave ourselves, then it becomes dark.
We mentioned the journey just briefly, but it was odd how he brings it up. Like I have a driver coming to take me on a journey, but I don't know when. But I need to be packed. Now we also see that Niggle does nothing in lieu of preparation.
He says there's a quote in there that I underlined that said that. It's like, but you knew it was coming, but you didn't do anything to prepare for it or something.
You can find it. You can read it.
But he also says that all he had was a bag, and the stuff in the bag is basically what he spent his time doing. Some paintings.
Yes, I think that's a great observation. Is what we give our life to is what we'll take with us. In a sense, you can see that. So what you spend your time doing is what you're going to present. There's a great quote by I think it's a motivational speaker guy. I think it was Eric Thomas or one of those guys. But anyway, he says, God's gift to us is our life. Our gift to Him is how we live our lives. And some of us don't even use the gifts that He's given us. How many of us would like to take our life back and try again and say, because he said some people, at the end of their life, they get labeled not used up. And Dr. Wayne Dyer says, you don't want to die with the music still inside you.
Oh, jeez. It's like gut-wrenching. Man, that's good. You mean to read this?
Yeah.
It says, what was the matter with Niggle? His heart was in the right place. Yes, but it did not function properly, said the first voice, and his head was not screwed on tight enough. He hardly ever thought at all. Look at the time he wasted, not even amusing himself. He never got ready for his journey. He was moderately well off, and yet he arrived here almost destitute, and had to be put in the pauper's wing. And then the last part just says, a bad case, I'm afraid. I think he should stay some time yet.
Yeah, so the other thing he's pulling at here is, I'm reminded of the song from Alexander Hamilton, the play, the musical. So the musical. And it says he wrote like he was running out of time. And so
Why does he write?
he's running out of time. As an artist, I feel like that. And so the reason why I get so lost in my thoughts, and I'm going to be honest, I love being lost in thought, like being 10 billion light years away.
Oh, he literally today said, I love my mind.
I love that.
I do, because there's something about being
He
able
likes
to,
being inside there.
to be able to transcend where you are and think about things that, you shouldn't even be able to think about. It's amazing. And I love that. And I feel like I'm running out of time and to get everything down. And so what happens for me, I kind of feel like Niggle's like, I have to get this leaf right. He's suffering, laboring over these small, tiny details. He doesn't know why, but I'm like, I don't know. I need to write this. I need to write this. I need to write this. I need to get this out. I need to get this out. No one's even listening to me right now. I have like 700 followers on Instagram. Nobody's listening.
I'm one of those.
But I feel like I need to get this stuff out. And so by that wrestling, knowing that there's finality to it, knowing that that driver's coming and you don't know when it's going to come. And so you could spend your life being pragmatic and never and let the music die inside of you, or you could try your best to conduct that music out and to get it out the best you can, and maybe have some semblance of what your purpose was here. And so that's the balance that we're working with.
Jim Carrey's dad.
Jim Carrey's dad. Yeah.
He was an amazing comedian as well, and loved to do that. And then
Jim Carrey said he's the funniest man he's ever known, but he took the safe job and became, I think, a lawyer or a CPA or something. He became this, and his company went under, and they were on welfare, and and this is in Canada. He says that's when Jim Carrey says you can fail at things you don't want to do, and
he's like, why not fail at the things you love to do?
Yeah.
It's much better.
That's good.
So I think we'll wrap that up tonight, because the second part of the book is where it gets me, and this whole setup of just pulling these things apart and trying to figure out what questions maybe Tolkien's asking. Now, I didn't read any commentary on this, and I don't know if you guys did or not. I didn't want you guys to read commentary, so when we do something like this from now on, what I want us to come in and just unpack it ourselves. And I think after we unpack it, then we can go read some commentary, and we'll come back to the table and say, here's what others have said. Now let's wrestle with these things in an intellectual way. So I started to read Holly Ordway stuff, and I was like, no, I can't. I don't want that to influence what my perception was on this right now. But we'll go back to people who are masters at this and see what they say at another time after we go through. So I think we'll take one next Monday. We'll go through the book and we'll finish it, and then maybe the third night of this we'll go through and read some commentary. I'll send some essays to you guys, and you can look over and see. And then we'll come back and bring this collective thinking and go, okay, I think this person was wrong, this person was that, and kind of pull it all together. But thank you guys so much. This was a great conversation. I just love.
This was a good conversation.
It was a good
I wanted to
conversation.
share something but off the podcast.
Okay, so we will.
This is where he talked about all his drinking and his drug use.
We will close it up here. But thank you guys so much for coming and being a part of this.